This is kind of a hard video to make because I know ahead of time that some will interpret it just to simply mean that I am nuts. Because that is the end result of most gang stalking and narcissistic groups. There's been the term phrase narcissistic cults, narcissistic family cults. But there is a very, very strange phenomena that can happen where you are constantly sought after by these groups, and you end up being kind of subjected to being pushed into that scapegoat role over and over. And it's disheartening because you like to view yourself in a positive light, and these groups, their main goal is to get you to see yourself in a negative light, because that then empowers them, makes them feel relevant, important, significant. Power, did I say power? Powerful is the main one. And then once they get you in that role, they have a ready-made whipping boy. I don't like using that term because of its connection to, the worst part of this country's history. But there used to be a thing when I was a kid that was very, very popular in the early 70s when I was very little and enjoyed these things, and it's called a Bobo doll. It's just a blow up, you know, thing that's shaped like this, and it has a clown, persona painted all over this figure with a big compartment in the bottom filled in with sand. So you go up to this inflated, it's just vinyl plastic filled with air. It's circular all the way around, and it's painted as if it's a person that is dressed as a clown. And you can go up and just slug it really hard in the face, and it just goes all the way down and pops right back up. Actually goes past up, so it can actually end up hitting you back if you're not careful. So you have to slug it and then take a step back so it doesn't come up and slam into you, and then do it again. And kids would time it perfectly so that right when it was coming back up, they're already stepping into the next punch. That's your role. That's where they want you. That's where they want to keep you. So they can just stop by your office if it's at work, or stop by your bedroom if it's at a home, and hit this Bobo doll, that's you, hit this Bobo doll a few times and just slam it as hard as they can and feel better when they leave. So these people are very experienced and capable at forming this entity, you, into that role. And it's a slow, methodical process. Usually involves inviting you in first with positive interactions, flattery. The term they use is love bombing. And but they have to do it in a place of authority, looking down, complimenting down, and then it eventually becomes criticizing down to you, punching down. But I guess the part I want to address really is that somehow or another, for this to happen over and over and over, you have to have had that role as a little toddler coming up in your family, because then that's what imprints on you some kind of scent, or a persona that has specific mannerisms that these other people, both parties, the people that become very empathic and sympathetic to others' plights and loving and generous with their time and their heart towards ailing people, whether it be due to poverty or, jacked up teeth. People get ostracized for the strangest reasons. You could just literally have really jacked up teeth and have people judge you and mistreat you because of that. Oh, he doesn't have enough money to fix his teeth, or how can he allow himself to go around looking like that? He must really think poorly of himself. I see free dental implants everywhere online, and why don't they bother to take 5 minutes to find one of these places themselves so they can go get their teeth fixed, so whatever, could be, maybe you're not the most attractive person in the world. People will judge you for that and ostracize you and want to keep you at arm's length simply because you don't have a beautiful countenance. My goodness. So, we have this kind of weird social landscape that is sometimes hard to make sense out of, and sometimes very, very hurtful, right? So if you're raised within a narcissistic family cult or something close to that, and you are designated as the scapegoat, you have to be wary, because there are these dynamics out there, and these people get very, very good at reading mannerisms and being a predator and looking for their next prey. And as someone that was raised within that scapegoat role, you give off the demeanor as someone that they can manipulate and manicure into this person that they need you to be, so that they can have influence over you, control you, demean you. And my roommate just started coughing. He always does that to let me know that he doesn't appreciate me or hearing noises I make, so I'm gonna have to try to talk quiet. But the guy doesn't sleep at night anyway, so I don't really feel too compelled to talk too quietly. Now well, never mind. So myself personally, I grew up in a family with narcissistic tendencies, that I was clearly the scapegoat. And then in graduate school, I had a professor that just hated my guts and wouldn't call on me and would actually say out loud, "I'm tired of calling on you. Would someone else please raise their hand?" So here you have someone that's extremely enthusiastic about the subject matter, is very big participant, and the professor hates them. Isn't someone that really enjoys the subject matter like a professor's wet dream, I mean, he could have taken that as an opportunity to shape and mold me in a positive way and to really have made me kind of one of his underlings, I mean, this guy hated me so much that for our last year of graduate school, we had a practicum, which is your internship. You're actually working, right? And you have a supervisor which collaborates with your professor in the college, and you have to put in a certain amount of hours. You're working like part-time, like 20 hours a week. And I would keep a journal, and then every week, the boss at the school site would have to initial the week and say, yes, he did work these hours. He was experiencing these things that he's noting. So it's kind of like a diary, but then also kind of like, anyways, yeah, it records your specific hours because they have to add up to a certain amount and so on and so forth. And he said, okay, everyone has to schedule an appointment to come in and go over their journal. And so I made that appointment, brought my journal, sat down in his office one-on-one, and handed it to him. And he quickly took it and put it in a drawer and said, the procedure is I go over it on my own, and then I'll ask any questions thereafter that I feel are necessary, if I ask any at all. Okay. So about 6 weeks, 2 months go by, and now graduation is a week away. And he calls me over to him after class, and he goes, you need to come by my office. I'm like, okay, is there anything wrong? He's like, no, just standard procedures. Can you come by at 3 today? Yeah, I'll be there. So I go to his office at 3, and he's like, your journal, you're the only one that hasn't turned in his journal. What? I gave it to you. I had that appointment scheduled on March 1st at 2:30, and I gave you the journal, and you shoved it in your drawer, and you said you'll ask any questions that you might have, or you might not have any questions. He goes, no, you have me confused with someone else. I was like, no, your office, 3D, I sat down with you. You have the appointment in your organizer. You know it was for the journal. Everyone scheduled their appointments to hand in their journals. He goes, no, you're confused. So you cannot graduate without giving me that journal. What? He says, well, don't worry. We'll let you walk the stage for family members and everything if you can't find the journal. But you're not getting a diploma until you find me that journal. So, it was total setup, total vindictiveness. And this guy was Chinese. He was raised in China. And he said the only thing he ever wanted to be as a child growing up was the Marlboro Man. Now, people that grew up in the 70s know the big billboards and even the commercials, TV commercials of the Marlboro Man. And he said he loved America and just wanted to be a tough cowboy in America with those good American looks. He wanted to be white. And here I was with blonde, flat top, blue eyes. And I was always tan because I was always surfing. So I think that had played a large part of his hatred of me. But a lot of it is these things that toxic people pick up on in you if you come from one of these narcissistic families. And then after that, I became pretty much within about 2 years, I became the scapegoat at the third biggest school district in the country, Los Angeles Unified School District, and within psychological services. And it happened because of one very, very toxic boss I had that labeled me such and started speaking to other toxic individuals and letting them know, he's our guy. He's our Bobo doll. And then I got a best friend out of that same job, and he was the most social person I've ever met. So he had literally tens of friends, 20, 30, pretty close friends that he would see several times a month, some every week. And amongst his wife and eventually his children, the children loved me at first, like all little kids do. But as they became kind of precocious, like preteen, they started to pick up on the family. Like the wife really, really disliked me and made me feel uncomfortable whenever I was over. Like I was taking her husband from her. Because he used to like to spend a lot of time with me. We had surfing in common. And he had a pool table in the back, and I'm okay at pool. He's okay, so we could have pool games where we would win kind of equally. So it was a good competition. We also would play one-on-one tennis, one-on-one basketball. We would take mountain biking rides through the mountains, all kinds of stuff. But I noticed among his wife, eventually his children, and all of his friends, they treated me as if I was of no account. So I love that old Western expression, because to me, not everyone treats you with contempt and disdain when you're in this scapegoat role, but they'll treat you with indifference. And it's like you just don't matter. Your opinion, your input in the conversation, everything is kind of just like an irritant, and they just avoid eye contact, they avoid interacting with you. And sociology and psychology say that this is much more hurtful than someone that looks you in the eye and expresses rage, anger directed at you, at your person, because at least they're interacting with you, they're acknowledging you. Whereas just total avoidance of you is more hurtful, because it's treating you as if you're not there, as if you don't exist. So that's what all of his friends did. The wife was more disdain and contempt, and the kids were more like that, just stay away from me. Don't interact with me. I don't appreciate you. I don't want you around me. I don't want your interaction. So then, I get out of that friendship around 2018. I moved farther away, and he never once came down to surf. I have this beautiful, uncrowded right point break that's completely down in San Pedro, and it's completely, only 2 guys out usually. There's usually 1 to 3 guys out with head-high surf on a point break. It's a little bit ragged, rock bottom and rocks on the shoreline. But, he and I grew up surfing Mexico with these ragged points, and we know how to surf that. You just wear booties and you're careful when you take off. But never once, I invited him so many times, and he only came down to that house like once or twice for like my birthday, So I was able to slowly kind of separate from that relationship. And then work, I would change areas. They have different units, so I would go to different bosses by changing from South Central to West, and then I changed to South. But it would only usually buy me like 1 or 2 years before this one main boss that designated me a scapegoat and hated my guts would influence that new boss. So within 1 or 2 years, like the honeymoon period in the new district, they would start looking at me funny, asking me strange questions, and then start mistreating me and writing me up and stuff. So this guy, even from afar, was still made sure that I was abused. Even, it's like, I'm sure he's got new scapegoats in his unit, and yet he's still having to make sure that me and my new unit is being abused by the boss in that unit. So this guy was really, really smart, really, really computer savvy at the advent of computers. I started working in this district in 1997, and everything was handwritten. There was no computer stuff at all. So very, very rapid changing taking place with PCs and laptops, and everything became digitalized. So he could write programs. So he was extremely respected and influential for these reasons. So I get out of the family, I get out of that friendship where all of his friends treat me as a scapegoat. I get out of that job and I feel completely free of toxicity and abuse. And I now have no friends where I move and no friends, right? And so no family. So I'm thinking I can supplement my friends and family by really getting involved in my Catholic church. And it starts over there. Starts with the clergy. Yeah, and I don't want to talk bad about the Catholic Church or any office within the Catholic Church. So I'll just leave it at that. But, and some members of the congregation have problems with me immediately because I'm joining these men's group, Bible study, and they start saying disparaging little jokes that only one or two people pick up on, and myself, that I'm dumb enough to hand out my YouTube channel to these people, little writing on paper. So some of them get my background story and then start making jokes at my expense. So I continue on this path trying to fit in for 2.5 years because, you know, you've been through it so many times that you just kind of try to look over it. You know, I want to fit in. And there's these individuals that don't want me, don't want to accept me, but that's just these few individuals. You know, I'm going to keep plugging. I'm going to keep showing up, showing my pearly whites, and glad handing people. And eventually, you know, the smear campaigns will go by the wayside and everyone will see that I'm a relatively good person and I'm here to be of service and so on and so forth. Well, these narcissistic individuals are able to spread their influence over non-toxic people, and they're able to be so discouraging and cause such painful experiences, even insulting you publicly, that it just kind of eventually it wears you down. And so I had to leave. So the whole reason I'm making this video is just to say that if you come from one of these toxic families and you're a scapegoat from early on, be wary. These people are out there. They are multiplying. It's social media, computers first, but social media primarily, that is changing personalities. You know, because parents have been taught to be extremely passive in their parenting roles and to become friends with their children and to try to get them whatever they want, whatever toys they want, to never hit or spank your child, never raise your voice to your child. But the Bible tells us, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child. And we can create little monsters just by, you know, the best way to really care for a child is to be willing to risk that relationship in order to raise a good person. So sometimes you have to get stern. You have to raise your eyes and put your finger on your face and go, you don't hit your little brother, you know? You don't scratch him in the face, you know? And when things are serious, you have to get serious with them. Take them by the wrist, get down on their level and reprimand them sometimes. And you have to spank them sometimes, right? The Bible is always very, very true. And if it says spare the rod is for spanking. You know, you're going to spoil the child. So today, no rod, no reprimanding, and buying them whatever they want. We're making little monsters. And then they tap into social media where they can get all of this narcissistic supply, they call it, you know, in order to make themselves feel relevant, powerful, influential. And they live within this little false persona that they are extremely important. Everyone looks up to them. Everyone likes my selfies, you know, on social media or whatever. And so these people are multiplying and they're out there and they become part of these toxic groups that have to have a scapegoat. in order to have someone to look down upon and to feel superior. You know, every toxic group has to make at least one person their scapegoat. Draw close to the Lord because he sees everything, he knows everything, and he'll give you little things like this. You know, I just found this on a picnic table. Be brave. You know, because he gives us a brave heart and a courageous, a courageous heart and a sound mind. I forget what passage that is, but you know, he just gives you things. He's there supplying things all the time. Like, I had one mid-sized bowl, and the two bowls I have aren't big enough for my oatmeal in the morning. So, you know, I had this one mid-sized bowl that I had since childhood, a glass bowl, and I had two, but I was down to one, and I broke it. So I had no mid-sized bowls, and it's been a couple weeks I've been there. I really need some mid-sized bowls. Go outside my door, there's a bunch of these nice mid-sized bowls. And I only have one large bowl that I make my salads in. And there's some large bowls too, so I get a second large bowl and I get like 3 of these mid-sized bowls. Beautiful. You know, I was literally at the grocery store and money was tight. And I was like, I need 3 bananas for my smoothies. It's like, no, I came in here for 2 items. I promised myself I'd only get these 2 items, and I got like 5 items. No, I'll come back on Saturday and I'll get my 3 bananas then. Step outside my door in the morning, 3 bananas right on the bench right outside my door. So these kinds of things happen all the time that just you'd have to be, if you have ears to hear and eyes to see, you know what's going on. This good and gracious Lord of ours is there for me. He sees all the little private talks and back rooms where these people are plotting and scheming against you and trying to shove you into this, accepting this role of abuse, contempt, and disdain, where, God forbid, you ever leave this role. You are to stay in that role. You know, and they don't realize you don't need anyone. When you have the good Lord, you don't need anyone. You know, it's nice to have, you know, it's a perk to have, you know, on a bad day, someone to call up and say, yeah, I'm frustrated, you know, A, B, and C happen. And to just have the guy, you know, kind of listen, you know, or just give back, yeah, damn, you know, I've been through some stuff like that. Yeah, that's all you need. You don't really, you just need a kind of a sounding board, and that's a perk. But you can use the Lord for the exact same thing, you know, and literally, if you pray enough, you'll get those warm feelings of his love right when you say the right things in prayer, like I just felt it right now, you know, and he's always there. He lives within you, and he's always comforting you. He's always loving you. He's always providing for you. And you realize at the end of all this that everything has been a blessing, because it has forced me to totally rely upon this good Lord and Savior. You know, during the pandemic, I lost my career because I wouldn't get vaccinated. But he was right there letting me know, don't get it. You know, you'll be fine. I'll support you. So now I really don't have much in the way of money, but it makes me depend on him that much more. And, you know, false safety, you know, is something that really can get in the way with people really forming that tight, loving relationship with the good Lord, Jesus Christ, because they know that, you know, who cares if I lose my job? Who cares if I get, you know, $1,000 ticket speeding on the freeway at 110? Who cares? You know, I got so much money in the bank. I own 3 different properties. I own 2 businesses. You know, and you just can become your own demigod, your own little safe haven. You don't need God in your life. Whereas if you're abused and sucked into dysfunctional groups everywhere you go, you start to really become cautious around people and start to avoid joining groups of people. And then if you don't have much money, sometimes in order to pay bills and to get food in your belly, you have to rely upon this Lord, and he comes through. He's never going to not be true. He's never going to break a promise. He's never going to not be there for you. Sometimes it feels like he's not there. And sometimes it's the hardest times in your life where you feel like he's not there. But it's because you're crushed in spirit. And so you're not able to give thanks and pray the same way. And a relationship, just like any relationship, is two-way. So your heart posture counts for just as much, if not more, than this entity, the supreme being. In order to be receptive to him, we have to be in a certain disposition, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and then he's able to, that still small voice of his is able to communicate more clearly with us. So it's not him. There's that old passage that, this guy goes to heaven and Jesus shows him an image and says, this is your life. And there's two sets of footprints walking through the sand on the beach. And the guy notices at certain points, his hardest points in his life, there's only one set of footprints. And he says, how come you left me during the most trying times in my life? You abandoned me. And the good Lord says, no, I was carrying you. Those are my footprints, and so he's still there. Sometimes we don't feel him, but he lives within us. And it's such a comfort, when people have been so hurtful and so full of contempt and disdain and want to use you, manipulate you and use you as a garden tool, something that they can hurt and abuse in order to make themselves feel whole. So you're just being usurped. Your energy, your goodness, your tolerance, your availability, giving of your time, it's just being used. There's no appreciation. There's no genuine connection. There's nothing good there. And you just realize, wow, it's true. When, God says to Abraham and Lot, and God says in other places, like before the flood, there's not one good person. All of their hearts are evil. When you really come to that realization that, wow, none of us are good. We're all fallen. We're all broken. And really, having these relationships is like trying to walk through a minefield. Okay, let me pull back from people a little bit and step forward into that relationship with Jesus. And that's his invitation, for these chosen ones. He knows our whole life, how difficult it's going to be. And he knows that we end up gravitating towards him and trying to win souls for his kingdom. And so he loves us. He gives us special care. He knits all of us in our mother's womb. But these abused individuals that end up drawing so close to him, and he to you, because the good Lord draws close to those that are crushed and brokenhearted and crushed in spirit. And so it's kismet, and we are weak because we're humans. We're frail, mortal, flesh and blood beings. We make his power perfect, as Paul says, our quotes the Lord saying. So it's a perfect symbiosis. And I just realized the video's gone 34 minutes, but this was a kind of a serious one. And just look upon all this abuse. If you've been through this, it's all permitted by the Lord, because he knows it's what's going to draw you in that relationship, earn you eternal salvation. He loves you so much, and he's looking forward to sharing his countenance with you for all of eternity. And so it's perfect. It's all just how it's supposed to be. And these narcissistic people hate it when you tell them that. I was going through so much abuse at the hands of my covert narcissistic mother, and then the villains that were in my face was my brother and his wife. But I told her, she'd always call me every day and want me to bitch and moan, complain about my sleeping problems, complain about how I'm being treated. And she got so upset when I told her, I'm good. What do you mean you're good? You can't sleep at night. Your brother and your sister-in-law's abusing you. Come on, give me some narcissistic supply. Tell me about it. I'll be like, no, it's not necessary. Everything is just how it should be. What do you mean everything is just how it should be? And so when you get to that point, you just accept everything is good. Everything that I go through is permitted by the Lord. And it's his crucible. He's refining me as if I was silver, to build my character. Pain and suffering builds endurance. Endurance builds character. And character builds hope. And hope never fails those who love the Lord. And so it's all by design. Allow the Lord to shape you and mold you into the person that he made you to be. God bless. Leave a comment, and I will talk to you later.